Let's get started. So, hello and welcome to Demystifying the Application from the admissions team at Yale SOM for the Masters in Asset Management program. My name is Laurel Grodman. I serve as Assistant Dean for Admissions at Yale SOM. I'm also a graduate of the MBA program at Yale SOM. And I'm thrilled to be joined by two of my colleagues who are both members of the admissions committee for the Masters in Asset Management program, Julie Dahlquist and Melissa Croft. Today's a really unique opportunity for us to hear from our team here that serves on our admissions committee. And we all work on designing the asset management application each year. We review applications and ultimately select members from the incoming class. So this is a really great opportunity to hear directly from the folks who will ultimately be reviewing your applications to the program. And our aim today is to provide you with a brief overview of the school and the asset management program, but then spend the bulk of our time together reviewing the main components of the asset management application, offering you tips and advice along the way. And we'll be sure to leave time for your questions at the last portion of today's session. So please submit any questions that you have using the Q&A feature of the platform, not the chat function. That's not the area that we'll be monitoring. So again, if you have questions that you'd like us to review at the end of today's session, please use the Q&A function. We ask that you try to keep your questions relevant to a broad audience. If you have very specific questions that relate to your individual situation, you can always contact us via email at our program inbox, which can be found on our website. We also have a number of upcoming events related to the application process that would give you an opportunity to ask a little bit more of individual questions. So please be sure to check those out as well. So with that, I'd like to share a little bit first about the Yale School of Management and what makes the Masters in Asset Management program distinct among business and Masters in Finance programs. So to kick things off, whenever I talk about Yale SOM, the first place I always start is with our mission, which is to educate leaders for business and society. Our mission is shared across all of our degree programs, including Masters in Asset Management, and it serves to inform everything that we do as a school. And so no matter the discipline or the area of focus of a given program at Yale SOM, we aim to develop leaders who can think broadly about the challenges we face in an increasingly complex world, and who can be decision makers in environments that call for multiple stakeholders, influencers, and consequences. Our students are positioned both to be successful in their careers and to have a positive impact on society. And our programs really attract students for whom this mission resonates. And one thing that fits quite naturally into our pursuit of this mission is our close connection with our home institution, Yale University. So when you join the Yale SOM community, you are really joining the broader Yale University community and all of the opportunities and privileges that come with this. Yale is really an extraordinary place to learn from top academics and fellow students across a broad range of disciplines. And so whether it's taking elective classes in our computer science department, or attending a lecture on the future of energy markets that's hosted by the Yale Center for Business and the Environment, or CBAE, or taking a class in quantitative investing with one of the asset management program founders, Professor Toby Moskowitz, the opportunity to connect with all that Yale has to offer is really an essential aspect of the Yale SOM experience. And it helps you develop into the type of investment leader who thinks across disciplines and incorporates varied perspectives when solving the big challenges in your future career paths. Great. So now I'd like to give you a little bit of background and context about our Masters in Asset Management program and why this is a program that really made sense for Yale to develop and in some sense could only exist at Yale. So for some history, the program was created by Professor Toby Moskowitz, who I mentioned, who is the Dean Takahashi Professor of Finance at Yale SOM, in partnership with David Swenson, the late Chief Investment Officer for the Yale Investments Office and the pioneer of the Yale model of endowment management. And the two of them saw a real need and a demand for finance programs devoted to asset management specifically that combines the best of academic theory and practice. And so their vision was to merge the perspectives and experience and expertise of top finance scholars with leading investment managers, resulting in a truly unique curriculum. So there are really three distinctive features of the curriculum that I'll call out: the coursework, the connection to leading minds in the field, and the opportunity to put it all into practice. So the asset management program is a 9-month degree program. It's divided into a core curriculum and elective classes. So most of the core classes are taught by top-ranked SOM finance faculty who are pursuing cutting-edge research across a variety of topics relevant to the field of asset management. And then most of the elective courses are taught by leading investment managers who are in the field, navigating real-life market conditions and challenges in their day jobs. You also have access to the elective MBA courses offered at SOM, as well as courses that are available elsewhere within Yale University. And because of Yale's unique in-house expertise, our external connections to industry, and access to the broader university, we're in a position to offer an extensive and unique slate of course offerings developed specifically for the program, like hedge fund strategies, behavioral finance, ESG investing, machine learning, quantitative investing, venture capital, private equity, just to name a few. So areas of study very specific to the field of asset management. And then in terms of our connection to leading minds in the field, we also offer what we call our Asset Management Colloquium, which gives you unparalleled access to industry leaders across a range of relevant fields. And they come to Yale in an intimate setting to speak directly to the students of this program. And then lastly, in terms of gaining practical experience and putting some of these recently acquired skills into practice, you'll complete what we call a practical experience requirement, which is a minimum of 40 hours in the spring semester, which gives you an opportunity to begin to pivot into industry and put some of your recently acquired skills to work. It can be fulfilled in a variety of ways, such as interning with an asset management firm, working with a Yale SOM finance professor with research related to the field of asset management, or participating in an investment-focused case competition. We've had students engage in all of those different types of practical experience requirements. We're also highly focused on students' professional success. So we have a dedicated career specialist in the career development office who works exclusively with asset management students, even before the start of fall classes. And as a student, you'll have access to the Yale network of employment and internship opportunities, proximity to major asset management firms in New York City and Boston, and the Connecticut corridor is really beneficial for our students, although our students have found employment in a variety of geographic areas across the globe. I'd also like to call out that there is a joint degree option between our MBA and asset management program, making it possible to earn both degrees in just 2 years. There is a separate application process for the MBA program. There's lots of programming right now going on about that application process as well, but today obviously we'll be focused on the asset management application specifically. And then lastly, I'll note for international applicants, our program offers the opportunity to qualify for an additional 2-year STEM extension of their post-completion OPT work permission. So this is a STEM eligible program, which is a great benefit as well. So I'll conclude in talking about the program in saying, one of the things that I've heard Toby Moskowitz say over and over was that he and David felt that this was a chance to do it right, meaning to give our students a one-of-a-kind chance to learn the theory and the practice of asset management with an emphasis on both the ethical and fiduciary responsibilities of investment managers. And so in other words, it's an opportunity to do well while doing good. So just to share a quick snapshot, this is our current cohort of students. This is one of our newer programs at Yale SOM. We welcomed our 4th cohort into the program earlier this fall. So it's comprised of 60 students. As you can see, there's a wide variety of different geographies represented across the globe. The class is 45% women. And as we'll talk about in a little bit, I like to point out the distribution of work experience. So we call this an early career program. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. But as you can see, about half of the incoming class joined us directly from an undergraduate experience, and the balance had a bit more work experience. The majority of our incoming students will have, I'd say, kind of 1 to 3 years of work experience or so, but it is not limited to that. And again, we'll get into that a little bit more. And then our most recent class had 5 joint degree students, and that number varies a little bit from year to year, but they're an important part of our cohort as well. All right, so before I turn it over to our panelists to get into some of the details of the application, I want to start by just giving you a high-level sense of how we're assessing candidates for the asset management program. And so in our evaluation process, we're really looking for three things. The first is your academic preparedness, with a particular lens of assessing your quantitative preparedness. It is an academically rigorous program with a large focus on quantitative skills, although not exclusively. And we want to make sure that we're setting up our students to thrive in that environment. The second thing we're looking for is your professional impact and potential. So this is demonstrated through your work experience, your extracurricular involvement, and your personal interests. And then lastly, we're looking for your desire to make an impact in the field of asset management immediately after graduating from the program and beyond. As hopefully I've been able to convey, this is a really unique and specific program. It's not just a broad-based finance program. We are really looking for people who are excited by the idea of studying and working in the field of asset management. And so being able to convey that in your application will be important. And so each element of the application, you can see an overview of those here, aids the admissions committee in our assessment of one or more of these dimensions that I just mentioned. And we look at them holistically to pull in the information that we need, given each of your own unique academic histories, your professional experience, and your personal backgrounds. And what this means is that there's no one ideal candidate for the asset management program here, but rather that our students can come from a variety of different academic and professional backgrounds and find success within the program. And so I'll touch a little bit more. I mentioned that we consider this to be an early career program. So it's targeted towards early career professionals, which really refers to being early in your asset management career. Whether you're coming directly from an undergraduate experience or you've been working in another field and are looking to make a pivot. And so that means we expect to see a range in terms of the quantity and the depth of professional experience that our applicants bring, as well as the distance from your academic studies. And so as part of the holistic admissions process, we'll rely more heavily on your academic experiences and perhaps internships or research experience if you're a current senior or a recent college graduate. If you've had more professional experience, we'll incorporate that depth of experience into our review process. So we're evaluating based on the same overall criteria for all of our applicants, but we're meeting you where you are, based on where you are in your trajectory and what you bring to the table. One of the final things I'll mention is all admitted applicants will be automatically considered for merit-based scholarships. So there isn't a separate essay or application process required for scholarship considerations. Scholarship recipients are chosen based on their exemplification of the admissions factors that I just mentioned and the perspective that they'll add to the class. And you're notified of your scholarship decision at the same time that your admissions offer is given. There's also a limited amount of scholarship funding available based on demonstrated need, and the process for that comes after admissions. So that's the scholarship process. And then just logistically speaking, as a final point, our application deadline for the Master's in Asset Management class of 2026 is coming up in just over a month, January 9th, and we will release all admissions decisions on March 27th. So with that, we're going to dive into some of the individual components of the application process, and I'd like to turn things over to my colleague, Melissa. We'll start our review of the application components with the elements that relate to our assessment of your academic profile. So Melissa, thanks so much for covering this very important area.
Thank you, Laurel. Yes, this is a very important part of your application. And so starting with just this idea of your academic preparedness, we are looking to set candidates up for success in a very rigorous program, as Laurel mentioned before. So this means that we're looking for evidence of strong academic performance in your studies to date, no matter the area of study that this may have been in. And with that, I'll say that there are no particular majors scores that are preferable to others and evidence of intellectual curiosity and exposure to different areas in your studies is viewed as a positive. So this means that we are admitting students to the program who come from areas like finance or economics or applied math, but we're also admitting students who studied maybe chemical engineering or political science, or perhaps someone who double majored in French and psychology. And this is a person that we admitted to the program, so a fun example that I like to share. So in order to assess your academic preparedness, we are looking at a few things together, including your transcripts, your test scores, any courses or certifications that you might have pursued outside of your formal studies, and finally, your academic letter of recommendation. And I'm going to walk you through each one of these and what we're looking at within these elements of your academic profile. So starting with your transcript, regardless of your area of study, we will be looking at your undergraduate academic transcript as well as any graduate transcripts if your studies extended beyond university. And the first kind of highlight and pop out here, we really are looking beyond your overall GPA at the types of classes you've taken, how you've challenged yourself over time, how your grades have trended over time. It's really not just the cumulative GPA listed at the end of your transcript that we're looking at. So we're taking a deep dive at every line of your transcript. And now kind of moving further into the transcript, I am the operational helm of our team. And so I'll say, as the person on the back end reaching out to anyone with an incomplete transcript, it's really important that you take a deep dive look into the instructions, because incomplete academic information tends to be the number one thing that holds up an application and review. So just be sure to really follow the directions closely for how to enter your information. And I'll offer, some notes that I see most commonly that we're missing information. So first, transcripts should either be copies of your official transcript or be a digital version of the transcript that contains the same information as a physical transcript. And this should include the university grading key, which will be at the end of every transcript that you have. Then also, transcripts must include course titles and grades for all schools attended, and this includes study abroad or transfer credits. If your study abroad or transfer credits do not appear on your main school's transcript, be sure to upload full separate copies for each of those institutions. And I saw a question about this in the Q&A already. If you are a current college senior, you'll have an opportunity to update us with new grades over the course of our application review period. So if you haven't received grades for fall 2024, but you get those in February, be sure to send that information to us as soon as you have it. We completely understand that you won't have all that information right away, but send it whenever that's available. And last note that I'll offer on transcripts, if you'd like to share any professional or personal development activities not taken for a university level credit, such as a CPA, CFA, any online courses that you didn't receive course credit for, you can include this on your resume. Be sure to only include degree conferring institutions in the academic records section of your application. Now, the second thing that we're looking at in our evaluation of your academic profile is your scores. So the first thing I'll say about this is that we accept both the GMAT or the GRE, and we truly have no preference for one over the other. And we also don't have a minimum score requirement here. And you can get a sense of the score range for the current class on the class profile page, but I'll note that those are the folks who ultimately enrolled in the program and is not the full spectrum of people that we have admitted. And for test scores in particular, I just want to highlight that this is never the sole indicator of academic potential, but a strong test score can be a really helpful counterpoint to a weaker undergraduate performance, or it can help establish quantitative preparation if you haven't had as much exposure in school. And with that note, I just want to mention that both quantitative and verbal scores are shown to be predictive of success in management programs, though again, a test score alone is not what we're relying on to gauge your potential. I also want to note that we encourage you to share your entire test score history. We can't combine the scores from different testing dates for different sections for a super score, but we will use the highest score achieved in our evaluation. And seeing your testing history over time provides us with a more comprehensive view. So, for example, maybe you scored higher in the quant section of a test score that wasn't your highest overall score. And this would be really good information for us to have when we're gauging your quantitative preparation for our program. And please note that we do require verified score reports for both your GRE or your GMAT. So be sure to send those official score reports our way as soon as they are available. Now turning to quantitative profile. So as Laurel mentioned, this program is clearly not exclusively focused on quantitative concepts, but a certain level of preparedness and quantitative subject matter will give you the foundation that you need to really dive into the coursework from day one. So we will look to understand what exposure you've had to date. And as I noted before, you may have studied econ or mathematics, and you'll naturally have a good deal of quantitative exposure in your curriculum, but it's also possible that you've studied engineering or chemistry or even earned a liberal arts degree, but you have some exposure to statistics or some applied math along the way. In considering your quantitative preparation, a couple of different places that we're looking. First, general quantitative exposure in your transcripts. What sort of classes did you take that involved quantitative concepts? 2, we'll ask you to list out and identify specific quantitative courses that you've taken, as well as any programming preparation. We'll consider both formal coursework taken, as well as any less formal study you may have taken, such as through certificate courses. Specifically in the quantitative background section of our application, we'll be asking you about calculus, linear or matrix algebra, statistics, microeconomics, and computer programming experience. Courses in these areas are not required for admission, but exposures to these subjects will provide a highly beneficial background for the curriculum. We absolutely admit students who have not taken any of this coursework prior to admission, but it really helps us to understand your starting point through this section. So your responses will help us identify if you might benefit from additional quantitative exposure prior to matriculating at Yale SOM through our summer self-study program. And then alongside your transcript and any classes that you've taken, your GMAT or GRE quant score will also help us assess your preparedness here, especially if you didn't have as much quantitative exposure in school. And now the final piece of our evaluation for your academic profile is your academic letter of recommendation. So in our process, we ask that you provide 2 letters of recommendation, one from someone who knows you in an academic setting and another who knows you in a professional or applied setting, which Julie will talk about later. For your academic letter of recommendation, this gives us just another detailed perspective on your academic performance beyond your coursework. So my top recommendation here is just to pick someone who knows you really well. This can be a professor who knows you from a smaller seminar style class, or a research advisor, or an academic mentor. Professors from larger lectures can work too. Just make sure that they have more to say about you than simply restating the grade that you received in that class, which we'll be able to see on your transcript. Finally, the last thing that I just want to mention here in terms of academic profile is that if your native language is not English and you have not completed a degree in an English-speaking country, you are required to submit either the TOEFL, the Duolingo English test, or an IELTS exam, regardless of the language of instruction at your university. So if you studied in a country or territory that lists English as an official language, you are still required to submit an English language test. However, there are some exceptions that you'll see in the application, so be sure to read those instructions really carefully to better understand whether or not this will be required of you. And again, here, when it comes to tests, we really have no preference between which one you submit, so feel free to choose whichever works best for you. And now I will pass it along to Julie to talk about assessing your professional impact and potential.
Great, thanks, Melissa, and welcome everyone. Welcome. So, as Laurel noted before, when it comes to assessing professional impact and potential, we're meeting you where you are. Some of you will be coming directly from your undergraduate experience, and so necessarily will have no full-time work, but you've likely engaged in professional internships or academic research, as well as extracurricular activities or personal pursuits. If you have full-time work, you'll want to highlight those experiences. Once again, our target for this program is early career, but what that really means is early in your asset management career. If you've gotten experience in another field but are looking to make a pivot, we're still interested in knowing how you performed in a professional setting in that other context. And your interests and pursuits outside of finance or other quantitatively focused activities are important to us as well. Even in the most quantitative asset management role, your ability to think strategically, connect the dots across industries or different disciplines, and communicate to and collaborate with others will be critical. We are interested in seeing where you commit your time and how you operate and interact within a variety of settings. So thinking about components of the application that help us to get a sense of these things, we're looking at first, and probably most obviously, the resume. The resume is an extremely important part of your application. It should showcase in a clear and concise way your academic experience, professional experience, including internships, part-time work, research experience, or any other non-classroom experience you've had during school, and any volunteer work, activities, or interests that help to tell your story. In the Yale SOM application, you'll see we provide a resume template to use if you'd like. You'll see that we very strongly recommend a one-page resume with clearly communicated work progression, start and end dates, as well as space for a high-level academic experience and additional information that you may choose to include. Condensing your resume to one page is a very valuable exercise. It makes you hone in on what's most important, which makes it much easier for the admissions committee to identify these experiences and accomplishments. Focus your resume bullets not simply on a description of your jobs, but on highlighting your accomplishments or the impact you've achieved in each experience. So for a few more tips about your resume, if you've worked for an organization that is smaller or more locally known, it can be helpful to include a brief one-line description of the organization under the organization name on your resume. The resume is also a great place to include information about your involvement in things outside of work, as well as any certifications or coursework completed outside of your academic record. We read thousands of resumes. Please put it in a legible font with ample white space. This is much more likely to get a close read than something that is barely legible. So second, we are considering the work experience section as part of your professional experience for the application. This section asks you to list all part-time and full-time work, internships, and supervised research experiences since graduating from high school or secondary education. We feel that your detailed list of employment experiences, in combination with a resume that highlights your individual responsibilities within each position, gives the admissions committee a better understanding of your career path to date and your potential to thrive in the asset management industry upon graduating from the program. Please take your time with each work experience entry. By dedicating time to carefully reflect and craft your entries, you can provide a more comprehensive and meaningful portrayal of your professional journey. We ask detailed information about each job entry, including but not limited to organization name, modality, how you secured the position. So please allow ample time to complete this important portion of the application. Rushing through this section may inadvertently limit the depth of information shared, leaving the admissions committee seeking further clarity regarding your professional impact. And third, we're considering your workplace letter of recommendation. In addition to the academic letter of recommendation mentioned earlier, your second letter of recommendation ideally should be from a professional or extracurricular supervisor or another individual who has worked with you in an applied setting. This can be an internship, a full-time work experience, research, long-term academic project, extracurricular leadership role, or something to that effect. The best people to write your letters of recommendation are the people who have supervised you and formally reviewed your performance versus asking someone based on a prestigious title. If you've worked full-time or had an internship experience, you'll ideally get a recommendation from your supervisor in that position, although there may be reasons why this is not possible, which you might want to share in your optional statement. If your recommender's primary language is not English, know that we are reviewing for content versus writing ability. So I'll call out that many candidates think this piece of the application is out of their hands, but we believe this is a piece that you can influence. I always encourage candidates to meet with their recommenders or schedule a call when possible to communicate why you're pursuing a master's in asset management degree and why now. I would also jog their memory about projects or professional experiences you had at their organization that the admissions committee might benefit from hearing about. In this way, you're priming your recommenders to be reflective and thoughtful about writing a letter that will shed light on your performance at work or in the classroom, your trajectory, and potential to excel in this program and beyond. And finally, as part of the professional experience, we are looking at the activities section. In the activities section of the application, we'll also ask you to identify the most meaningful undergraduate and post-undergraduate activities you've been involved with, up to 2 from each. Picking your top 2 gives us a sense of what you've dedicated the most of your time and talents to. You can, of course, include additional activities on your resume. I encourage you to think broadly about activities. They can be extracurriculars, sports, volunteer work, research or academic activities, employment or work study during school, familial roles or responsibilities, personal affiliations, or hobbies or personal interests. What this really does is that it gives us a better sense of who you are and how you apply yourself. And just a few final notes on presenting your professional and applied experiences. Please read the instructions for the work experience section closely. Any full-time work, part-time work, internships, or research experiences that appear on your resume should also be input into the work experience section of the application, along with the requested detail. Once again, please read the instructions for how to do this very closely, and please keep in mind that we will use this information to verify your employment should you be admitted to the program. Connect the dots. If you've transitioned between post-undergraduate roles, use the work experience entries to explain why you've left a given role for a new opportunity. And if you have a gap in your work experience or academic history, we encourage you to use the Gaps in Work Experience section or the optional statement to provide an explanation. So now I'll pass it back to Melissa to talk through the essay component of the application.
Thank you so much, Julie. So as Laurel mentioned at the top of, the session, the 3 things that we're looking at, academic preparedness and professional impact, just the first 2 are ones that we've already talked about. And the last key component of your application that we are seeking to understand in our evaluation is your interest in the field of asset management. So as you've heard from Laurel, this program is distinct among master's degrees in finance due to its unique focus on the theory and practice of asset management. And we really want to understand what drives your interest in this field and how you envision the pursuit of those interests will play out for you in the career that you launch after completing the program. So we'll seek to understand this in a few different ways, but first we have an essay that directly addresses this question. So what are your short and long-term career interests? Please describe what drives these interests and how they connect to your academic, professional, or personal experiences. So as I mentioned, this is a very specialized program, and we want to understand how your interests align with what this program can offer you. And we're asking you to be both forward-looking and backward-looking in answering this question. in looking forward, we'd like you to identify what are you interested in pursuing during the program, and then your short-term and long-term career interest directly after completing the program. And then looking backwards, like Julie just mentioned, connecting the dots. We'd like you to reflect on how these interests have developed and how they're tied to your academic, professional, and personal experiences that you've had to date, including what you still need to learn and accomplish to achieve your goals, which this program can help you with. And I'd really like to emphasize that with this, you don't need to have everything figured out by the time that you're writing your essay. Maybe you're interested in several different fields or functions within asset management, or maybe you have a sense of what you'd like to try in the short term, but it could take you down one of several different paths in the long term. Or maybe your interest is in a fundamental versus quantitative approach or vice versa, but you're not yet sure of what sort of organization or role you'd like to work in to apply that approach to. And all of these options, all of the above, that's okay. We're most interested in hearing what has led you to want to pursue these interests, how they've connected with what you've learned to date, and at this point in time, how you envision making your impact in the field. And it's important to note that our essay has a 500-word limit, so we encourage you to be clear and concise in your communications, and we really do believe that 500 words is more than enough space to respond to the question that we're asking, so I highly recommend not going over that. And finally, I just want to offer a quick note on the usage of AI. Laurel actually wrote a really great statement that's on the instructions page of our application, so I highly recommend reading that thoroughly. But as it applies to our essay, if you choose to use AI assistance for written materials, I recommend that you approach it the same way that you would ask a friend or a colleague for help in brainstorming topics, organizing thoughts, providing feedback, or offering input on grammar, style, and other minor edits. Just as you can't ask another person to write your essay, AI-generated content should not be the primary source of your essay content. I really want to make sure that your voice and your ideas are at the forefront. So just keep that in mind as you're writing your essay and considering whether or not AI is a good source to use for that. Alongside the essay, I just want to offer a really quick note about the optional information section of the application, which appears on the same page as the essay question. Most candidates do not need to complete this section. That's why it's called the optional essay. It truly is optional. I really want to highlight that you shouldn't use this as an opportunity to answer a question that we haven't asked. Instead, if you need to provide some additional context around something that is part of the application, such as your reason for choosing an unconventional recommender, an unusual timeline for your academic or professional pathway, or maybe context that would help us understand for academic performance, this is the place that you'll do that. And then rounding back to the idea of telling us about your interest in the field of asset management beyond your essay, we'll also do this by looking at the types of activities and experiences that you've pursued to date. So once again, this is an early career program, so the expectation is not that you've had exposure to asset management or a job in this field already, but if you have had the opportunity to gain some sort of related experience, either professionally or through an activity, this is certainly evidence of interest that we'd like to see, and you may want to include this in your essay when you talk about how your interest developed. Some examples of this, like I mentioned, might be an internship or participation in a student investment fund, or potentially some independent investing projects or case competitions that you've entered. We would definitely like to see those examples outlined in your essay. But again, I'll underscore that candidates without this experience can definitely be successful in this program and in our admissions process. And now I'll turn it back over to Julie to discuss the interview process and how that works for you all.
Thank you, Melissa. So the final place we will get an opportunity to go into more depth about your interest in the program and in the field of asset management is in the interview. The interview will cover a number of aspects of your interests and experience. This is a good place to mention that interviews are by invitation, and we will start sending email invitations in the weeks following the application deadline on a rolling basis. An invitation can come at any point throughout the application review period. Interviews are conducted by a member of the admissions team. And so should the committee issue an interview request, it will take place virtually using an online video conferencing platform. So just a few tips related to the interview. First of all, please remember the basics. Be on time, be professionally dressed, and come prepared. The same basic tenets for a successful in-person interview apply for an online interview. Second, prepare, but don't over-prepare. Know your resume, your accomplishments, your interest in the program, and some key experiences you'd like to share if prompted. However, please don't script your answers. This never goes well. I'll repeat, it never goes well. This is meant to be a natural, unscripted conversation, and it's important to listen to the questions asked and provide a spontaneous response, pulling from the mental preparation you've done, but not relying on pre-written responses. Since the rise of Zoom, we've seen many more candidates trying to over-prepare for interviews by writing down detailed answers ahead of time. The conversation will go much better with responses that aren't 100% perfect, but are delivered naturally than if you try to plan for every possible scenario ahead of time and then rely on your notes to give your responses. And then third, have intelligent questions for your interviewer. This is not information that you can easily find on the website. And please remember, the interview is a two-way street. We want to learn more about you, and the interview is an opportunity also for you to learn more about us, our school, and our community. And now I'll hand it back to Laurel to talk about two components of the application that you'll complete after you hit submit.
So much, Melissa and Julie. So rounding out the application experience, there are two aspects of the application that are unique to Yale SOM, and both of them come after you hit submit and pay your application fee. So those are the video questions and the behavioral assessment. So once your application is complete, you'll be given a link to a separate platform through which you complete your video questions as well as the behavioral assessment. So you can't go looking around for these on the application just yet unless you have already hit submit. So first I'll cover the video questions. So as Julie just shared, we have an interview process. So these are not a substitute for an interview, but instead your responses to the video questions help us assess your language skills for international students. And for all students, just helps create a more three-dimensional view of each of our applicants. And so the way that the video questions work is that a member of the admissions team will present you with a question, and you'll have a short period of time to formulate your response and then deliver it. So specifically, you'll have 20 seconds to gather your response and 60 seconds to deliver it. For the first question, and then 30 seconds to consider your response, and 90 seconds to deliver your response for the second question. So just based on the content, you have a slightly different window for thinking and then delivering on each of those. And in terms of what the questions are, they're not trick questions. No preparation is needed above and beyond the self-reflection you're already doing for the process of applying to graduate school programs. But we do want to get a sense of how you articulate yourself on your feet. So you want to avoid coming in with scripted responses, just like Julie said, for the interview. Same goes for the video questions. And you're not going to want to rely too much on any notes that you take during your thinking window. Those are really just to help you formulate a response, but it's important to develop it and deliver it authentically and in your own voice. The final of the three questions you'll be presented with on the platform will require a written response, which you'll have 8 minutes to write. And once again, this is nothing that you'll need to prepare for in advance. And I would say for all of the video questions, whether spoken or written, you're not going to want to rely on AI or any kind of pre-written responses for this. Again, we're looking to get a authentic, unique to you response in your own voice, at which, again, as Julie said in the interview, even if it's not perfect, it's going to be much better than something that that involved outside assistance and that isn't delivered authentically. So just a few pieces of advice here in addition, become familiar with the time frame. Depending on who you are, 60 or 90 seconds can go by in a flash or feel like it takes an eternity. So just get comfortable with what it feels like to deliver a response in that time frame, and then you'll feel more comfortable and prepared to deliver your answers. There is a practice tool, so you'll have an opportunity to practice in the actual format before you go in for your official recording. So test your camera, test your microphone, and just take a moment to feel comfortable with the technology. Be sure you have a good internet connection and a quiet private space. We think it's fun to see your roommates and your cats and whatnot go by on the screen, but it will probably throw you off your game for those things to happen. So just make sure you've got a good quiet place to go through the assessment. As I said, be yourself, be natural, and that is my best advice for delivering a response that's going to be effective for your video questions. All right. And then lastly, turning to the behavioral assessment. So the second application element that you'll complete after hitting submit is our behavioral assessment. Yale SOM developed this assessment in collaboration with ETS a number of years ago, the makers of the GRE. It is unlike the GRE or the GMAT, it's what we call a non-cognitive assessment. So rather than looking at cognitive skills, it's looking at interpersonal and intrapersonal competencies that through our research we know are associated with success in business school programs. So what is this thing? It is an online module. It takes about 25 minutes to complete and should be completed in a single setting. You don't need to do anything in advance to prepare for the assessment. Doesn't require any kind of specialized knowledge or background. What the tool actually does is present you with pairs of statements. So things like, I like to go to meetings and I'm an organized person. And you have to pick the one that feels more like you. There are 130 of these pairings, so the point is to move quickly and not overthink it. There is no one individual question that's going to decide your admission. In fact, the assessment as a whole is not going to decide your admission. What it does is provide valuable information when used in context with other elements of your application. So the point is not to stress about this, but just keep in mind it is something that you'll need to do after you hit submit. All right, so with that, hopefully we'll have a little bit of time left over now for Q&A. If you haven't already, please use the Q&A function, not the chat feature, to ask any questions that you might have. I think we might be putting up a couple of links in the chat. As I mentioned at the top of the hour, we do have a number of upcoming events in the month of December and even into January to help you prepare your best application and ask some of the more individual questions that you might have. So please be sure to check those out and sign up for anything that you feel might be helpful. But with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and we can get into some of the questions. All right, give me just a moment here. So I think I am going to start with some of maybe a couple of the more basic ones. Is January 9th also the deadline for video questions and the behavioral assessment? Thank you. I should have mentioned it is not, and in fact, I bet Melissa knows the actual deadline, but we do give you a couple of days. It's a short window, but we have what's called our post submission materials deadline, and that is when your video questions, your behavioral assessment, as well as your official test scores are due. And Melissa, remind me of a precise date for that to happen.
That's on January 13th, everyone. So you have 4 more days to submit your application, take a little bit of a breather, and then get all those other materials in.
Okay, next up, I see a question about study abroad grades. So regarding grades gotten in a semester abroad, is it okay if my university's transcript includes those grades for that semester, but doesn't specify it was at another university since they revalidated them? So I'll broaden that question for just in general, how to approach study abroad grades and all the various ways in which it may or may not appear on your official university transcript. And I'm going to hand that one over to Melissa, who covered our academic section.
Yeah, for study abroad, information on your transcripts, the two most important elements for us are the course title and the course grade. So if that is listed on your undergraduate university transcript, it says all the information for your study abroad. It includes the grade, it includes the course title, then you do not need to procure a second transcript directly from your study abroad institution. So if that information is there, then not a problem, even if they don't say that that's coming from the study abroad institution. I saw that question was asking, that they kind of reevaluated and put, the courses there directly as if it was coming from your undergraduate institution. That's absolutely fine. As long as we see the course title and the course grade, then you're good to go. But if that information is not there, then please do get that second transcript for us and put that into your academic record section.
We also had a number of pre-submitted questions for the events that were really good. So I'm going to take a couple of those as well. The first of which was, what pieces of information are you expecting to find in an academic or professional letter of recommendation that are often missed? And I'll rope in, I saw there was a question in the Q&A about if you are also applying to the MBA program, which asks for, by and large, 2 professional letters of recommendation, whether you actually need one of each. So it's a good opportunity, I think, here to emphasize, for this program, it really is important for us to get both an academic and a professional perspective on your experience. They do sometimes complementary, but really different things within the application process. So if you have been out of the classroom for a while, it may feel a little bit more challenging to go back and ask for an academic letter of recommendation right now. But for that very reason, I think it is important for us to understand, how you will be able to perform when you're back in an academic setting. And a professor is going to see different aspects of your skills and your abilities than a professional letter of recommendation would. So we do ask, whether you are just applying to the asset management program and are a few years out of school, or if you are applying to the MBA program as well, in which you'll need 2 professional letters, we do still ask you to get an academic letter for the asset management application. And as was mentioned before, I think the thing that is most often missed in an academic letter is sometimes really precipitated by your choice of recommender. So it's the individual kind of reflection on your abilities in the classroom. So if you're going with, maybe just the class that you performed the best in, and it happened to be a big lecture where you didn't have a lot of, exposure to the professor themselves, chances are the letter is going to be fairly generic. It's not necessarily going to be a ding on your application. It's just not going to be additive in that sense. We're not going to have an additional sense of how you've been able to interact with the course material and demonstrate your abilities in the classroom setting. And when you're thinking academically, and think broadly, it doesn't necessarily have to be someone that you sat in a classroom with. It could be someone who served in an advisory function, but maybe had access to some of your other professors who were able to give input across a number of different classes. It could be someone that you did research with. So these are all options. It doesn't strictly need to be someone who stood in the front of the classroom. And then in the professional letter, in terms of things missed, I think this most often also comes from choice of recommender. So I always recommend, when thinking about letters of recommendation, to think on 2 dimensions: proximity and recency. So in terms of proximity, it's much better to go with someone who directly supervised you and knows you in a day-to-day capacity than it is to go with someone with a big title who maybe only interacts with you sporadically and doesn't have a whole lot of depth to give to a letter of recommendation. And then recency, for those of you who have been in the professional setting a little bit longer, we're really most interested in understanding your current status in the workplace and how you interact professionally today. So we know it's not always possible for a variety of reasons to go to a current supervisor, but as close to current as you can get is my advice there. So again, proximity and recency, I think, are the things to keep in mind there, and which typically will yield the most complete and most helpful letters of recommendation. All right, so one of the other pre-submitted questions that came through is, I'm a current graduate student and want to know how the admissions committee views me as an applicant pursuing your program as my second graduate degree. Julie, do you want to try your hand at that one?
Sure. Thanks for the question. Appreciate it. So I will start by saying that we see all types of kind of academic depth when we review our application. So as mentioned many times in the presentation, we have students coming directly from undergrad. We have students with a little bit of professional experience. We also have students who have, for one reason or another, decided to pursue different master's degrees prior to coming to us to the Master's in Asset Management program. And we respect and acknowledge everybody's path that has gotten them to, come to us at this point. A lot of people coming straight out of undergrad are, some of you have chosen to get, a more general finance degree, maybe have taken a class or two in the asset management, arena, and decided that that's something that you'd like to pursue further, and now are just coming to pursue a master's or a more specialized master's degree. That path makes a lot of sense to us. So please provide all the transcripts to all of your graduate degree experiences. But I think this is something that we see often, and we value all of your academic experiences, and so we'll take that into consideration when evaluating.
I am going to try my best to do sort of a speed round through the Q&As that I see, because a lot of these could potentially benefit from a longer answer, but I want to see if I can at least give a concise answer to some of the things that are put out there. So I'm going to go real quick. Are international students considered for scholarships? Does Yale SOM offer full ride scholarships, including the cost of living to some extent? So answer is all students, including international students, are considered for scholarships. The scholarship amounts vary, I think all the way potentially up until full tuition coverage, not cost of living. So full range of scholarship amounts. I'm currently a PhD student and have a bachelor and master's degree in quantitative finance. That's, I think, similar to what Julie answered. Any sort of academic background will be considered, both your performance and sort of the relevancy to the field that you are looking to study now. So this is not a less competitive applicant profile. As we shared, there is room in the class and encouraged to have a mix of academic and professional backgrounds, both in terms of area and in terms of quantity. Let's see, we talked about deadlines. There's a couple of questions here about WES evaluation for transcripts. You're welcome to submit a WES evaluation. I'll answer honestly here. We care a lot less about the WES evaluation than the original format of your application. We receive applications for all of our programs across the world. We're very comfortable with reading transcripts in their original form. If your transcript is not translated by your university into English, we will need an official translation, as well as the original documentation, but having those is key. Submitting just a WES transcript will not be sufficient for us to review. And like I said, we rely much more heavily on the original transcript than anything translated from WES. Right, we talked about who should submit your letters of recommendation. Is there a GPA threshold? No. As we said, we look at all of your academic information in tandem. There are no thresholds. Should online courses be included in a resume? up to you. There's an opportunity to include those if they're quantitative courses in the section where we ask about your quantitative exposure. So you can feel free to submit detail about it there if you feel like it's relevant to reinforce on your resume or bring some additional information about courses maybe that aren't the ones that we're asking about in the quantitative section, but that you want to share. The resume is yours to highlight the things that you want to bring to the attention of the committee. Someone who would like to connect post-webinar today for pre-assessment. I'm sorry, we are unable to do that. As you can imagine, we receive many applications each year. We're not in a position to give pre-assessments on applications, but the idea of having sessions like this and the many others and all of the resources that are available just on our website each day is to give you sort of the guidance to put your own application components into perspective and, think about if there are areas that you want to focus on. One more question that I wanted to address from the pre-submitted questions here is it advisable to wait until a future cycle to submit a stronger application, or is reapplying viewed negatively if you take a shot now and then don't get in and apply in a future cycle? So we are always looking at the full trajectory of your application, which includes reapplications. Your candidacy will always become stronger the more that you self-reflect and the more that you add to your work or your academic experience. And so it is definitely not a negative mark in any way to have applied and not been accepted and then to reapply. As a reapplicant, you will be asked to answer an additional short prompt that highlights what has changed since your last application. And that's a really great opportunity for you to show us that self-reflection. I wouldn't necessarily recommend just submitting the exact same application that you did previously. Each year is a different application cycle, and we are evaluating you within the pool of the applicants that we get. So there's no guarantee one way or another, but if you are going to reapply, I would certainly think about what has changed about you and your application and what you bring to the table since the last year and highlight that for us. But I would definitely not discourage you from applying because you're not certain that you've been able to put together your strongest application at this point. Just going through the application process, I think, gives valuable feedback. So with that, I think that's a good place to conclude today's event. My apologies for not being able to get to all of the questions, but I do hope you'll be able to join us for some of our future sessions coming up this month. And as I mentioned at the top of the hour, if you have very specific questions about submitting your own application, you can always feel free to reach out to us in the asset management inbox. So thank you so much for your thoughtful questions and for joining today. Thank you to Melissa and Julie for all of your insights. And we are looking forward to the opportunity to get to know many of you better over the coming months. Thank you and take care.